Alrighty guys, I'm gonna do this video here to kind of walk you through the parts that you should have received, and then give you a couple pointers on the install. So, alright, obviously the diff. We have the diff here. It's built, it's torqued. There's nothing you need to do to this. It is ready to go in the car. So everything the way it comes, it's ready to go. Next we have the front clamps. These clamps connect to the front support that lock it in your frame nice and snug. Pay attention to those. There is a left and a right. The rear portion of those clamps doesn't matter. You can flop those around. You'll have 10 bolts for the left, 10 bolts for the right, and then the two 3/8 bolts. Those ones actually go up under here. Those ones hold the support to the clamp. Next you have the rear bracket. So you'll have the 4 main bolts that hold it to the frame, and you'll have one 1/2-inch shoulder bolt that attaches the bracket to the diff. Next is the sway bar drop bushings, and those pretty self-explanatory. They drop the sway bar so that we have driveline clearance. On the driveline side of things, we have the CV boot, washers, bolts. Those bolts bolt the CV to the flange on the diff, and you'll have a gasket, CV grease, and a circlip. And that circlip holds the CV to the driveline, and of course your driveline. So if you have a, for the most part, stock car, it's not been modified or stretched or chopped up, this is a plug and play kit. Sorry for the air, it'll be blown off this whole time, but this is what you will receive. This is what you should have laid out. So I'll get my phone mounted and we'll go over a couple of install tips. Alrighty guys, so the first thing you want to do obviously is remove the stock diff. Take the stock diff out of the car and pull your driveline out of the car. And what I would recommend doing right off the get-go, so you don't forget, because I've installed one and forgot to do this, remove the boot that is on the front of your driveline. It's the boot that connects the driveline to the transmission. Take it off your old driveline. We're going to reuse that, get it cleaned up, get all the old grease and debris out of it, and get it slid onto your new driveline, and then you can set your driveline aside. I recommend doing that because I have installed an entire diff and forgot to put that on, and that sucks. So we'll set that aside. The next thing I would do, being the diff, driveline, everything's out of the car, is I would go to your sway bar drop bushings. These are a 2-piece bushing, pretty self-explanatory. Loosen the 2 bolts, remove the clamp off of them, take your old rubber bushings out, replace it with these. That's the bottom half, upper half. Put your clamps back on and tighten the bolts up. Okay. The next thing would be your CV. So pay attention to the CV orientation and how it goes on to the diff. One side is larger and one side is smaller than the other. So if you try to put the larger side on, it just rocks around. It will not go onto the flange. When you have it orientated the right way, it snaps in and there's like zero tolerance there. It doesn't move. So just pay attention to that. Once you figure that out, draw arrows, if you want to use a Sharpie pointing towards the diff, just whatever you need to do to know that you can keep it orientated the correct way. After that, you're pretty much ready to pack the CV with the CV grease. What I like to do, you don't have to do this, but I recommend doing it, is I will tape this entire thing up with masking tape, and I'll get it nice and thick. Then I'll come back with a razor knife and I'll cut it out all the way around. Just the part that you need to pack with grease is what I cut out. That way the rest of it, the holes, everything else, it's protected. It's not going to get loaded with grease. So once you do that, pack your CV with grease. Be sure you get it packed as good as you can. You can put a little bit of grease on those splines there. That won't hurt. Just helps it slide on. Once that's packed up, then we're getting to the point of putting this on. There's a step I'll talk about, but pay attention though when you go to put this on that the holes are lined up perfectly. It's really important that you have those holes lined up. Now before you go to put that on, we need to lay a bead of RTV or silicone right along that dark line. I would follow that dark line all the way around. And that's pretty much the nice little fine bead you need to lay of silicone or RTV. Once you do that, you're ready to now, this is a press fit, but you're now ready to put this on. So like I said, line the holes up. That's the most important part. Be sure they're perfect. And go to your vise. If your vise is chewed up, if the jaws are beat up on it or scored up, I would recommend using 2 pieces of wood, or using a rag or something, just so you don't score these parts up. And then go ahead and start slowly just tightening into this as you turn it. So tighten into it, give it like 1/8 of a turn, tighten into it, give it 1/8 of a turn, and keep doing that until that, you'll see it'll literally be pressed on. There won't be a gap there in between those parts. This will now be pressed onto that. Pull that back off. But once you do that, now you're ready to slide this, and this will be one piece. You're ready to slide it onto your driveline. I'd recommend using some WD-40, squirting a little bit on that rubber because it is a really tight fit. Put a little bit on the shaft here, and then this and this will be one piece. And now you're ready to slide that on, slide the rubber and CV onto the drive shaft. Once it goes on there, I'm going to set that aside. It'll look something just like that. Once you do that, now you're ready for your circlip. Use a pair of snap ring pliers and pop that on there, and that'll hold your CV onto the driveline. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'll set that stuff aside. You're to the point now where you can install the driveline into the car. Take whatever remaining CV grease you have and put it into that female coupler that's on your transmission, so that we're giving these splines up here some grease. Okay, and now remember, you need to have that rubber boot on there, but now go ahead and install this entire driveline assembly with the CV on it, the CV boots on it. That's ready to slide into the car. Push it into the transmission, pop that rubber boot on. It'll snap on to your driveline here, and it snaps onto the female coupler coming off your tranny the same. And then just let your drive shaft assembly just rest on your sway bar. From there, the next step will be this little rubber right here. So what I recommend doing is taking some rubbing alcohol, brake cleaner, anything that'll clean really well, and get this surface really clean and dry, free of any debris. And I'll actually use super glue, and I'll put a little dab of super glue on this rubber. Hopefully you can see it. And I'll start to just lay it out exactly how it goes. Just be sure to not let that rubber interfere with that threaded hole, because you'll fight that trying to get those bolts in. And just get that gasket super glued on all the way around, just like so. That's how it should be. And that makes life a lot easier when you do the install. Okay, at that point, pretty much you're ready to put the diff in. Get your diff put in the car. The easiest way is, like, you'll install it with the nose up like that, and then walk the back end up and get your 2 bolts in loosely. Go ahead and slide them all the way in, put your washers on, put the nuts on, just hand tight. From there, you can go to your rear bracket. Hopefully you can see this. Rear bracket comes in from the top, just like so. It'll come in from above, like bring it in like this, come in from the top. It'll go right into place. Go ahead and slide your shoulder bolt through. Put your washer and your nut on your shoulder bolt, just hand tight. Go ahead and get these, your rear bolts, get the washer on those, get those going in, finger tight, just make sure everything aligns. From there you can go ahead and go over to your clamps. Remember, there is a left and a right here. This one would go on the driver's side. So go ahead and get that on your frame with the rear half, like so. And keep all this pretty loose, because we want to be able to twist it, turn it to get everything to align. Be sure that your bigger bolts can start, your holes are aligned. You'll see that from laying under your car. So get your left one, get your right one on. Be sure all bolts can line up, all bolts can thread in. Once you have everything aligned, once your rear bracket's on, the 4 main bolts are in the frame, shoulder bolts in, you can clearly see these holes are aligned. Go ahead and take a little bit of blue Loctite. I put some blue Loctite on these bolts here that go up under there and into those clamps. And at that point, you're ready to just start snugging everything down. Be sure that when you're snugging these clamps down, you're doing it so that the gap, there it goes this way, so that your gap is even. The gap here and the gap here, you shouldn't really have a gap. They pretty much close up, but just be sure you're tightening all those bolts evenly as you go. Yeah, and then the rear bolts, once you know everything's aligned, I'd pull these ones back out and one at a time apply a little bit of blue Loctite to these also, put those back in, and then tighten them up and just snug everything up. I mean, tighten the whole thing. Tighten your two main bolts, tighten your two bolts here, your clamp should be tight, your rear bracket should be tight. At that point, everything's done. So that's how that goes. At that point, you're ready to connect the CV to the CV flange, and that's pretty self-explanatory, but it'll look something like this. So, and obviously it'll be on your driveline at that point. And there won't be much room there to work with. I mean, you'll have a small gap, but you'll get it aligned like that, and then do your best to get the holes lined up so you don't fight it as much. And then you'll have these are your driveline bolts. They go into those washers like so. And that's pretty much how they'll look when you start putting them in. And you're going to use red Loctite on these right here. Your driveline bolts get red, and I'd go to 20 foot-pounds on those. So it'll look something just like that. And tighten all those up. Red Loctite, and be sure you get them all. So pretty much that's everything. I think we've gone through the clamps, we've gone through the rear bracket, driveline, sway bar, drop bushings. Before you go to put your axles in, I'd put a little bit of grease right here on that seal. Put some grease on the male splines themselves before you put them into the diff. At that point, you're pretty much finished up. This is your main breather right here on top. That's your main 1/4 inch NPT. Same here, 1/4 inch NPT. I come up here a couple inches and then put a T in it, and I run that line back down and into that side one there. It's pretty much just a back feed. So when you're going through whoops and the car is bucking and doing its thing, anything that's getting splashed out just feeds back into the side. And then from there you can run the breather line from the T up wherever you want. It's personal preference, whatever you want to do. And this is your fill plug. Fill plug here. Drain plug is the exact same plug. Drain plug's right there. The diff holds a quart of oil. I find a little bit of variance depending on the brand of oil you're going with, but typically it'll take exactly a quart. So if it spills out a little, that's fine. Just shove your plug in and tighten it up. But yeah, that should be everything. This is all the parts and everything it should consist of. If you guys have any questions about any of this, just reach out to me. Just give me a call.